Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, October 28th, 2025 edition of the SANS Internet Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich, today recording from Jacksonville, Florida. And this episode is brought to you by the SANS.edu Bachelor's Degree Program in Applied Cybersecurity. Didiear ran an interesting experiment looking into a question that often comes up when you're looking at DNS covert channels. Which characters can actually be transmitted as a hostname? Now, it should be pretty straightforward. The RFC allows upper lowercase letters, numbers, the dash, the underscore, and then, a dot to separate labels. But of course, that's the RFC. What's reality? Didiear looked here at two constraints. First of all, the operating system. If you're using the operating system's resolver library, it may restrict what letters you can send, and then, whatever recursive resolver you use. And Didiear here looked at Cloudflare and Google. Well, it turns out that the Windows resolver library actually is quite restrictive. It only allows the standard characters. Linux, on the other hand, and Didiear here picked Ubuntu as an example, is less picky and does allow pretty much any character in the standard ASCII set, so any 7-bit character from 0 through 7F. Once you take the resolver as the only constraint and basically use some Python library or something like this as your client resolver, in that case, things get more interesting. Now, of course, you can send any character. The operating system no longer constrains you. It's only the recursive resolver that you're using. In this particular case, either Google or Cloudflare pretty much allow any character to be sent and transmitted via their resolvers. The only constraint now is that Google implements this XOR scheme in order to change the upper and lower case of letters to prevent some spoofing attacks. And that then constrains that you, basically only can use case-insensitive data because Google may change the case of letters. Interesting results. And, basically, if you're using DNS covert channels, try to use Cloudflare as your recursive resolver because they are really just transmitting whatever you send. And again, this is when you're using host names. Of course, when using text records and such, you're not constrained by any host name rules, and you would be able to use any character that you can represent as part of a text record. And we have a critical vulnerability in the Unifi access product. It was identified by Catchify Security. There is no detail yet available as to how the vulnerability would exactly be exploited, but it does have a perfect score of 10 and would allow an attacker without authentication to gain full access to the API of Unifi access. So at the very least, they should then be able to basically bypass Unifi access. Unifi access is used to manage door locks and the like, so that's certainly one problem. But given the score of 10.0, it probably also means that further arbitrary code execution is possible on the controller running a Unifi access. As I mentioned so often, make sure that you're blocking access to these type of APIs, but no exploit yet, as far as I can tell. I imagine that an exploit is probably available within a couple of days, and that we'll find out that it's either a hard-coded password or something like this, or maybe some additional header that you need to add to the request in order to bypass authentication and access control. And the piece of software on a normal user's machine that probably has the largest attack surface is the web browser, because it is being exposed to large amounts of external information that is often unstructured and really hard to process safely in many cases. So what better than add AI to the attack surface? That at least is what OpenAI did with their Atlas browser. The problem now is that, of course, just like with any other AI tool, they did not separate control plane and data plane. They mix it all together, and URLs may now include instructions for the browser, for the OpenAI part of the browser, which then can lead to data leakage. Interesting demonstration here by Neural Trust. I've seen also others come up with similar blog posts for similar ideas of adding AI to browsers. The problem always comes down to is that text being returned by various websites, like URLs in this case, can be interpreted by the AI engine and then, of course, get access to files or other data that the browser has access to. In short, don't use these browsers for now, at least not on a production system. Definitely experiment with them, and maybe you'll find some other neat new jailbreaks and prompt injections for these browsers. Well, and that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing to this podcast. And as always, talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.